The crash came without warning one moment. Captain Ryland Cole was gliding through the dark stretch of space, his ship silent and steady. The next moment, alarms screamed, red lights flashed, and the control panel sparked in front of him. Something huge. Maybe a piece of an asteroid. Maybe debris from an old war. Hit the side of his ship, the hull broke open, metal screamed, and gravity pulled him down toward the nearest planet. He tried everything to slow the fall. The engines refused to answer, the wings caught fire, and the navigation system blinked its last red light before dying completely. Ryland shouted into the radio, calling for anyone, any voice, any signal, but all he got was static. Then came the blinding white light of entry, and everything went dark. When he woke up, he was lying in cold mud. His helmet was cracked, his suit half torn, and the world around him was strange, quiet and glowing. Huge trees rose into the sky, their bark shining faintly blue, as if filled with trapped lightning above him. The stars looked sharper than ever. Too close, too many, and somewhere far away. Something howled long and low, like the sound of metal scraping against bone. Ryland took a deep breath. He checked his gear. One small survival pack, one emergency flare, a half-working flashlight, and a broken plasma pistol. No communication, no tracker, and no ship in sight. He was completely alone. Stranded on an unknown world, he forced himself to move. His body ached with every step, but he knew staying near the crash site was dangerous. Exploding fuel cells, leaking plasma, one wrong move, and he'd be gone, so he walked into the forest, trying to find dry ground, somewhere he could rest, somewhere he could think. As he walked, he noticed things. The air was thick, almost humming with life. Strange insects floated near the glowing trees, their wings leaving trails of light in the air, and sometimes he thought he saw shadows move behind him, tall shapes, silent and fast. But every time he turned, there was nothing, only stillness. By the time night came, the cold grew sharp and heavy. His breath turned white in the air and his fingers began to numb. He found a small clearing near a fallen tree and dropped his pack. He knew he needed warmth, he needed light, so he gathered dry branches, rubbed two metal pieces together from his broken ship tools, and after many tries, the spark caught fire. The small flame grew. It danced in the dark, crackling softly. Warming his hands, Ryland smiled weakly, whispering, "At least I can still make fire." For a moment, the fear faded, replaced by a tiny comfort that only humans could feel. That small warmth against a giant, cold universe. He sat near the fire, staring at it like it was the only living thing left. He talked to himself, half to stay awake, half to fight the silence. "Okay, Cole," he said, "you're alive. You'll make it through this. Maybe the rescue beacons will pick you up." He looked at the stars again, trying to find familiar constellations, but these stars were strange, new, different, and too bright. Then he heard it, a whisper. Not the wind, not the trees, but something else. A sound that came from the dark beyond the firelight, like soft feet stepping on wet ground. Slow and careful, Ryland froze, his heart pounding in his chest. He reached for the broken plasma pistol, though he knew it might not work. The whisper came again, closer this time. Then silence. He stared into the dark, eyes wide, trying to see movement, but the shadows only stared back. He told himself it was his mind playing tricks. The forest, the cold, the exhaustion, and it could all make him imagine things. But deep inside he felt it, something was watching him. Something alive, something curious. The fire crackled louder, almost warning him. Suddenly, two small lights flickered in the dark, not eyes, but reflections. They blinked, then disappeared. Ryland tightened his grip on the pistol, whispering, "Who's there?" No answer. Only the faint rustle of leaves and the slow rhythm of his own breath. He looked around, then at the fire. Its light stretched far, but the shadows beyond it grew thicker, deeper. Ryland felt safer near the flame, but also trapped, like the light made him visible. Exposed still, he couldn't let it die. Not now, not in this cold. So he fed it more wood. The flames rising higher, he sat down again, tired, afraid, but stubborn. "Let them watch," he said quietly. "Let them see what a human can do." He didn't know that the moment he lit that fire, he had already sent a signal, a call across the dark forest, and that call had been heard by the planet's native huntresses waiting silently in the trees. The fire burned brighter than before. Orange light danced on the broken armor of Captain Ryland Cole. Each spark that flew into the night felt like a heartbeat, a small pulse of life on a dead planet. The warmth touched his cold hands, and for a few seconds, he almost forgot he was alone. The clearing around him was still, too still. No wind, no movement, no birds or insects, only the sound of the crackling fire. It should have felt peaceful, but to Rylan it felt like being watched by the dark itself. He sat close to the fire, staring into it like it could give him answers. His body was tired, but his mind kept running. He kept hearing things. Faint footsteps, rustling leaves, whispers carried by no wind. Every time he turned, the forest looked empty, but his instincts told him the truth. Something was there, hiding, waiting. He took a deep breath and tried to calm himself. "All right, Cole," he whispered, his voice rough. "You've survived worse." He thought about his old missions. The time he was lost in the asteroid mines of Vega. Back then he had teammates, he had a ship, he had a plan. Now he had only fire and fear. Rylan decided to make a log recording just in case. He pressed the small button on his wrist console. The only working device left, the tiny blue light, blinked. "This is Captain Rylan Cole," he said, his tone tired but steady. "Crash landed on unknown planet. Coordinates unknown. Communication systems destroyed. One survivor, myself." He paused, glancing at the forest. "There are signs of life. Possibly intelligent. I'm not sure yet." He hesitated, then ended the recording. The blinking light faded, and the silence returned, heavier than before. The fire popped suddenly. Making him flinch, he laughed nervously, shaking his head. "Jumping at sparks now," he muttered. But deep down he knew the fear was real. He wasn't alone. He could feel eyes in the dark, watching, studying, thinking. He lifted a branch from the fire, its tip glowing red. He waved it around the clearing, letting the light touch the trees. That's when he saw something. Not movement, not clearly. Just the brief shimmer of something tall slipping between the trunks, like a shadow that moved against the light instead of with it. Rylan froze, the branch trembling in his hand. "Hey," he called softly. "If someone's there, I mean no harm." His voice broke the silence, echoing far into the dark forest. But no voice came back, only the faint hiss of the fire and a quiet whisper in the leaves. He lowered the branch, his heartbeat loud in his chest. "All right, Cole, calm down," he muttered again. He sat back near the fire, watching the trees. Every few seconds, he thought he saw flickers of light, like eyes, reflecting the fire's glow, disappearing the moment he looked directly at them. Minutes passed, maybe hours. He didn't know anymore. The sky above him had strange colors. Purple clouds glowing faintly. Stars too close. Time felt slower, heavier. He looked at the fire again, its glow alive. That fire was the only thing keeping him human right now. The only sound in an alien silence. Then something strange happened. The fire's glow stretched. The shadows moved. Not randomly, but together, as if responding. Rylan blinked, rubbing his eyes. Shapes began to form at the edge of the light. Tall, slim figures bending, swaying, breathing. For a moment he thought they were trees, but then one of them turned its head, and light caught a pair of glowing eyes. Rylan's body went cold. He reached slowly for his pistol, but didn't lift it yet. He didn't want to make them think he was a threat. The figures stepped closer, slow and graceful. They were not beasts. Their movements were too controlled, too intelligent. One of them knelt, touching the ground. Another whispered something. Not human words, but a soft musical language that made the air vibrate. Rylan's heart raced. He wanted to speak, to show peace, but his voice wouldn't come. He was frozen between fear and wonder. The firelight revealed more. Skin painted with glowing marks. Armor made from scales and weapons curved like crescent moons. They were tall, strong, and silent. Their eyes reflected the fire like mirrors, showing his face in every stare. He understood now. The fire hadn't scared them. It had called them. Drawn them out of the darkness, curious about this strange creature who dared to make light in their world. Rylan swallowed hard, his voice finally breaking free. I don't want trouble, he said slowly. The figures stopped moving, listening. The leader, taller than the rest with silver eyes that glowed faintly blue, stepped forward. She looked at him, then at the fire, then back at him again. Her expression unreadable, her gaze sharp and steady. The silence between them was heavy. Rylan felt the air press around him, waiting for what came next. He didn't know if this was the beginning of peace or the moment before death. He only knew one thing. The fire's glow had changed everything, and nothing in this dark world would ever be the same again. The night had changed. What was once quiet and empty now felt alive with unseen power. Captain Rylan Cole sat near the dying fire, his heartbeat echoing in his ears. In front of him stood the figures he had only glimpsed before, the planet's native huntresses. They surrounded him like living shadows, silent, focused, graceful as wind through tall grass. The leader stepped forward first. Her skin was marked with glowing blue lines that pulsed softly with each breath. Her eyes were silver, reflecting both the firelight and the fear on Rylan's face. In her hands she held a long spear carved from crystal and bone. She didn't speak, but her presence said everything. Strength. Control curiosity. Rylan slowly raised his hands, palms open, showing peace. I don't want to fight, he said softly, his voice trembling but steady. The huntresses didn't move, didn't blink. They studied him, their heads tilting slightly, like hunters examining a strange new prey. One of them whispered something in their language, soft, musical yet sharp like metal. The leader answered with a calm tone, her eyes never leaving Rylan's. The air between them was heavy with silence. The fire flickered, casting long shadows that made their faces shift between light and darkness. Rylan's instincts screamed at him to run, but he stayed still. Running meant death, and something deep inside him knew these beings respected courage. So he stayed, breathing slow, watching their every move. The leader stepped closer, her movement smooth, every motion controlled and deliberate. She pointed at the fire, then at him. Her voice came out low and musical, but the words were strange, unknown. Rylan shook his head slowly. I don't understand you, he whispered. She frowned, tilting her head slightly. Then she repeated the motion, pointing at the fire, then at the forest, her tone sharper now. Almost warning, Rylan looked around. The trees behind her seemed darker now, as if something else waited beyond them. Maybe the fire wasn't just dangerous because of light. Maybe it called predators. Maybe it was a signal or a challenge. The huntresses had come not to attack him, but to see what kind of fool would light a fire in their hunting ground. He lowered his hands slowly, carefully. He picked up a small metal piece from his broken gear. He placed it near the fire, trying to show he meant no harm. The huntresses watched closely, their eyes following every movement. One of them stepped forward, crouching near the flame. Her fingers hovered above it, not afraid. But curious, the heat didn't scare her, and she touched the glowing coals for a second. Then she looked back at her leader and nodded once. Rylan realized something. They were not primitive. They were strong, intelligent, and fearless. Their armor was not made of simple material. It shimmered faintly like living metal. Their weapons curved with strange balance, designed for both hunting and war. He felt small before them, not as a human soldier, but as a trespasser in someone else's world then. One of the younger huntresses hissed suddenly. She pointed at the sky, or what was left of it through the thick trees. Rylan followed her gaze and saw something glowing faintly above. It looked like smoke but blue, drifting far into the air, his fire smoke rising like a signal for miles. The leader's expression changed. Her jaw tightened. She looked at Rylan again. This time, with more intensity, she spoke a few sharp words, and the group began to spread around him, one behind him, one to the side, one near the trees. They were forming a circle. Rylan's pulse quickened. He didn't know if they were protecting him or trapping him. He whispered, "What are you doing?" But no one answered. The leader moved closer until she was only a few steps away. Rylan could see the faint scars across her neck and shoulders, signs of battles long fought. She reached out slowly, her hand stopping inches from his chest. Her fingertips touched the metal tag on his uniform. His nameplate, she said something softly. Pointing at it, repeating, "Rylan." He nodded. Surprised. "Yes, Rylan," he said. Touching his chest, "Rylan Cole." She studied him, her eyes softer now but still cautious. Then she said something else, a word that sounded like firebringer. The others whispered the same word, their voices blending into the dark air. Ryland didn't understand the meaning, but he could feel its weight. They had given him a name to them. He wasn't a pilot anymore. He was the one who lit the fire, the one who called the Huntresses out of hiding. He tried to speak again to ask for help, but before he could, the leader raised her hand sharply. Every Huntress froze, heads turning toward the forest. Something had changed in the air. The silence broke. A low rumble came from the distance, deep and monstrous. Even the Huntress's eyes widened for a second. Ryland felt the ground shake beneath him. Whatever was coming was big, and it was coming fast. The leader's eyes flashed with warning. She turned to her warriors, shouting short, fast commands. Then she looked back at Ryland, her gaze fierce but full of meaning. He didn't understand her words, but he understood her tone. The message was clear. Stay alive. And as the fire flickered and the trees began to move, the real danger of the planet revealed itself. The Huntresses had not come to hunt him. They had come to prepare for what the fire had awakened. The ground trembled beneath Captain Ryland Cole's boots. The fire's glow shook and scattered sparks into the night air. Whatever was coming through the forest was huge, too heavy, too wild, too close. The Huntresses formed a circle around their leader. Weapons raised, eyes locked on the shadows. Their glowing tattoos pulsed faster, lighting up the dark like small blue fires. Ryland gripped his half-broken plasma pistol tightly. He didn't know what they were facing, but he knew one thing. This planet was far from safe. The leader shouted something sharp and powerful in her language. Half the Huntresses darted into the trees. Vanishing like smoke, the others stayed behind. Crouched low, ready to strike, the noise grew louder, branches snapped. The air filled with deep growls that didn't sound like any animal Ryland knew. The leader looked at him once, her silver eyes flashing in the firelight. She shouted something, fast, angry, desperate. Ryland couldn't understand her words. He thought she was blaming him. "I didn't mean to bring this thing," he shouted back. His voice echoed across the clearing. She yelled again, pointing at him, then at the fire, then at the ground, her tone sharp, commanding. Ryland raised his hands, his heart pounding. "I'm trying to help," he said. But to her, his raised weapon and shouting looked like a threat, not peace. Suddenly, one of the younger Huntresses moved behind him. She grabbed his arm roughly, trying to pull the pistol away. Ryland reacted by instinct, twisting, pulling free, shouting, "Don't touch me!" The leader's eyes widened. The Huntresses hissed, blades flashing in the firelight. To them, that single motion meant only one thing: attack. In an instant, they surrounded him again, their weapons pointed at his chest. Their eyes cold and sharp, Ryland froze, his breath quick and shallow. "Wait," he said, his voice low, his hands trembling. "I'm not your enemy." But no one seemed to understand. The leader stepped forward. Her face fierce, her voice strong, she spoke quickly, her words cutting through the air like blades. Ryland took a step back, but the Huntresses closed in, their formation perfect. Disciplined, military. He could see now that they weren't just hunters. They were warriors, trained and fearless. And he, the strange firebringer, had just broken their trust. He lowered his pistol, slowly placing it on the ground. Then he knelt, pressing one knee to the dirt. It was a risk, but he needed to show he wasn't a threat. The Huntresses hesitated, unsure. The leader raised a hand, stopping them from attacking. Her silver eyes studied him for a long moment. Then she said one soft word, quiet but firm. The others stepped back, still tense but waiting for her command. Ryland looked up at her, breathing hard. "I didn't mean to fight you," he said quietly. She tilted her head, as if trying to understand the tone of his voice more than the words. Then she looked past him, toward the forest. A deep roar rolled through the air again, shaking the ground, the sound of something massive. Moving fast, she gave a command, short and sharp. The Huntresses took formation again, but this time, they left Ryland inside the circle. Not outside it, he realized what she was doing. She wasn't punishing him, she was protecting him. Whatever was coming wasn't a misunderstanding anymore. It was a monster. And she didn't have time to explain from the trees. The creature appeared, a beast of muscle and bone, its body covered in dark scales that shimmered like oil. 4 glowing eyes, each burning red, locked onto the firelight, its mouth opened wide, rows of teeth glistening with thick drool. The beast roared again, the sound shaking Ryland's bones. The leader raised her spear high, shouting a word that echoed through the trees. The Huntresses moved like lightning, spreading out, attacking from every side. Ryland's instincts kicked in. He grabbed the pistol from the ground. Checking its charge, the screen flickered weakly. But it was still alive. He aimed, taking position near the fire. "All right," he whispered. "Guess we're doing this together." The battle exploded in front of him. Blades struck against scales. The beast swung its massive claws. One of the Huntresses jumped high, landing on its back, driving her weapon deep into its neck. Another rolled across the ground, slicing at its legs. Ryland fired a plasma shot. The blue bolt struck the creature's chest. Burning deep, the beast roared in pain, crashing into a tree, snapping it in half. The fire burned higher now, reflecting chaos all around. Ryland could barely see through the smoke. He heard screams, battle cries, pain, fury. He kept firing until the pistol sparked and died. Then he grabbed a burning branch, swinging it at the creature's face. The smell of burning flesh filled the air. The beast reared back and crashed to the ground, shaking the earth one last time. Then silence, only the fire crackled now. Ryland stood trembling, his face streaked with ash and sweat. The Huntresses stood around the fallen beast, breathing hard. Some were wounded, but none had fallen. The leader turned to him, her silver eyes glowing faintly. For the first time, she nodded, once slowly. A gesture of respect, Ryland lowered the burning branch. His heart still racing, he understood now. The fight had erased their misunderstanding. They didn't see him as a threat anymore. They saw him as something else, a warrior, a survivor. A human who fought beside them, and somewhere deep inside, the alien forest whispered again. The night was far from over, but the Huntresses no longer hid from the fire. They had found something new, a stranger who burned like one of their own. The forest was burning in places. Smoke curled between the glowing trees, turning their blue light into ghostly mist. Captain Ryland Cole stood among the Huntresses, his body shaking from exhaustion and adrenaline. The huge beast lay dead behind them, its dark blood steaming against the cold ground. The fire flickered in the wind, painting the clearing in red and gold. Ryland wiped the ash from his face. He could still hear the ringing in his ears from the creature's final roar. The Huntresses were silent, breathing hard, their glowing tattoos dimming slowly. They looked at the fallen beast, then at him. Their silver-eyed leader stepped forward. Her weapon dripping dark blood, she studied him, her gaze calm but deep. Then she said something short, her tone neither soft nor harsh. The others repeated the word, low and respectful. Ryland didn't understand their language, but he knew its meaning and respect. They no longer saw him as prey. He was now a fighter who had proven himself under the fire. He gave a weak smile. "Yeah, you're welcome," he muttered. The leader tilted her head, not understanding his words. But perhaps feeling their warmth, she reached down, tore a small piece of the creature's hide and placed it near the fire. Then she pointed to Ryland and gestured for him to do the same. He hesitated for a second, but followed, pulling a claw from the beast's paw. He placed it beside hers. The leader nodded. It was a ritual, a sign of victory, a bond sealed by battle. Ryland looked around. The night sky above them was glowing faintly green now, like a strange aurora shifting across the stars. The forest's noises had returned, distant cries, whispering leaves, the soft hum of life. But he knew it wasn't over. This planet was wild and alive, and he was still a stranger. He wondered what other creatures hid beyond the firelight, watching them just as the Huntresses once had. The leader walked closer. She pointed to his wounds, then to the ground. Ryland understood, and when she wanted him to sit, to rest, he obeyed, collapsing beside the fire with a tired laugh. His body ached all over, his arm burned from a shallow cut. One of the Huntresses approached carefully. She carried a small pouch made of woven fibers. She opened it, revealing a glowing blue paste that pulsed like liquid light. Without speaking, she touched it to his wound. Ryland flinched at the cold sensation. Then the pain faded, replaced by warmth. He stared in surprise as the glowing paste sealed the cut completely. He looked up at her, smiling weakly. "That's some miracle medicine you got there." She tilted her head, curious at his words, then smiled back, a small, cautious smile. It was the first time he had seen one of them smile, and somehow, that small expression made the alien world feel a little less lonely. But peace didn't last long. The leader suddenly raised her head, her expression sharpening. She looked toward the north, eyes glowing brighter. She said something quick and harsh, and the others immediately moved. Grabbing their weapons, checking the trees. Listening, Ryland stood too. his tired body alert again. "What now?" he muttered. The leader turned to him, pointing toward the darkness. Then she pointed to the dead beast and made a cutting motion. Rylan understood. More were coming. The first creature hadn't been alone. The fire and blood had drawn others. This planet didn't forgive weakness. It tested everyone who dared to survive here. The Huntresses formed a circle again, but this time, they included Rylan without hesitation. He could see it in their movements. He was one of them now. At least for this fight. The leader handed him a small blade made of dark stone. It was light and balanced. He took it carefully, feeling its strange warmth. It hummed softly in his hand like it recognized him. The forest began to rumble again, low growls, multiple this time. Echoing through the trees, the fire's glow trembled. Rylan glanced at the leader. She gave a small nod. Then the Huntresses moved together. Silent as ghosts, Rylan followed, crouched low. His heart pounding. From the shadows came shapes, 2, 3, maybe 4. Smaller than the first beast, but faster. Quicker. Their eyes glowed red. Cutting through the dark, the Huntresses attacked first. Their movements precise and deadly. Rylan joined in, striking when he could, blocking when he had to. It wasn't chaos anymore, it was rhythm. He moved with them, not against them, human strength and alien grace. Fighting as one, the air filled with light. Motion and sound, blades flashed, roars shook the air, fire cracked. One creature lunged at Rylan. He sidestepped. Cutting deep into its neck, another jumped toward the leader. She spun, driving her spear through its chest. The last one tried to flee, but a blue flash from one of the Huntress's weapons struck it down instantly. Then silence again, this time real silence. Only the steady breathing of survivors remained. The Huntresses looked around. Checking each other, no one had fallen. The leader looked at Rylan, her silver eyes glowing softly in the smoke. She said something quiet, almost gentle. He didn't know the word, but he felt it. It meant warrior. Rylan sat down beside the fire again, his chest rising and falling. He looked at the flames and whispered, "Trial of fire, huh?" He smiled faintly. The leader sat beside him, her spear resting across her knees for the first time. She didn't look at him as a stranger. She looked at him as an equal. The human and the Huntresses watched the sunrise together, and for the first time since crashing, Rylan felt something he hadn't in days, hope. The night faded slowly into pale light. The smoke from the fires curled upward like thin silver ribbons. Captain Rylan Cole sat beside the dying flames, his clothes torn, his face marked with soot and dried blood. The Huntresses moved quietly around him, their armor faintly glowing as the sun's first light touched the forest. They didn't speak, but there was something different in their eyes now. Not suspicion, not anger, something new, something warmer. Rylan watched them move with silent precision. They gathered their weapons, tended to their wounds, and checked the area for danger. He had seen soldiers before, disciplined and proud. But these warriors, these Huntresses, had a grace that felt almost sacred. Every motion had meaning. Every glance had purpose. The leader, the one with silver eyes, walked toward him. Her steps were slow, deliberate. Steady as the morning wind, she stopped in front of him, her expression unreadable. For a moment, they just stared at each other, two survivors from different worlds. Then she reached down and touched the mark on his sleeve. The old earth insignia still half burned, but visible. She spoke softly, pointing at it. Rylan nodded. "Earth," he said, tapping his chest. "Human." She tilted her head. Repeating the word, "human," she said, the sound soft and strange in her accent. Rylan smiled faintly, then he pointed at her. "You?" She paused, then pressed her palm to her chest. "Carol," she said. It sounded like a name. Proud, strong, ancient. He repeated it. "Carol." Her lips curved slightly, a faint smile that faded just as fast. The moment felt fragile but real. Two beings from different stars finding common ground without words. Rylan looked around. The forest looked different in daylight. It wasn't just alien, it was beautiful. Tall, glowing trees stretched high above, their roots twisting like rivers of light. The air shimmered faintly with tiny floating spores, and the sound of distant waterfalls echoed through the hills. Carol walked to the fallen beast and cut a piece from its scale. She held it toward Rylan, the blue-black piece gleaming in the morning light. He hesitated, unsure what it meant. She spoke softly, then pointed to the small crystal hanging around her neck. Made from the same material. It was a symbol, a token of honor. Rylan understood. She was giving him part of their victory. A mark of respect, he accepted it carefully, bowing his head. "Thank you," he said. She nodded once, placing her hand briefly on his shoulder. Her touch was light but carried meaning, the kind soldiers used after surviving battle together. No more words were needed. One of the younger huntresses approached, the same one who had tended his wound before. She handed him a small fruit-like orb, glowing faint green. Rylan looked at it confused. Karel gestured to eat. He took a bite, and the taste exploded in his mouth. Sweet, sharp, electric. It sent warmth through his body, easing the ache in his muscles. "Wow," he said, smiling. "Better than rations." The younger huntress laughed softly, a sound like wind through glass. For the first time since he crashed, Rylan felt safe. The forest no longer looked like a graveyard. It felt alive, full of whispers and possibilities. He stared into the distance, watching the sunlight crawl across the valley. For a moment, he forgot he was lost on an alien planet. For a moment, it felt like home, but Karel's sharp tone broke the calm. She pointed toward the sky. Rylan looked up and froze, high above, cutting through the clouds. He saw something metallic, not a star, not a beast, a ship. His heart leapt. "Rescue?" he whispered, standing quickly, but Karel frowned, shaking her head. Her expression turned cold, serious. She said something fast. The huntresses immediately moved, pulling weapons, hiding behind rocks and trees. Rylan's excitement faded into confusion. "What's wrong?" he asked. Karel didn't answer. She only pointed at the ship and said one word. "Hunters." The meaning hit him like ice. They weren't friends, they weren't rescue. Whoever they were, they hunted the same way these women did. And now they were coming here. Rylan felt a deep pit open in his chest. Maybe they were scavengers, maybe soldiers, maybe worse. Mercenaries searching for survivors and wrecks to claim. Karel turned to him, her eyes fierce and full of command. She said something quickly, pointing toward the forest's edge. He understood enough. She wanted him to hide. But he shook his head. "No, I'll help." Her jaw tightened. She stared at him for a long second, then nodded once. No more arguing, they would face this together. The huntresses melted into the forest like living shadows. Rylan crouched low, clutching his pistol. His pulse raced. His breath shallow. Above them, the ship circled lower, its engines humming like a dark storm. Karel signaled silently, a raised hand. Then a slow wave. Rylan followed her lead, his eyes fixed on the sky. The morning peace was gone. The forest waited, holding its breath. The trial of fire was over. Now came the trial of trust. And in that strange, glowing forest, a human and the huntresses stood side by side, ready to face the storm that would decide all their fates. The sky rumbled like a warning. The strange ship circled above the glowing forest, its engines growling like thunder trapped in metal. Captain Rylan Cole crouched beside Karel, his pulse quick and steady. The huntresses waited in silence, hidden among the roots of the great trees, their eyes glowing faint blue in the shadows. The forest held its breath, and the air smelled of smoke and rain. Rylan peered through the mist. He could see the ship now, dark, scarred, built for war, not rescue. Symbols covered its sides, none he recognized. It hovered lower, a beam of light cutting through the trees. Karel touched his arm gently, shaking her head. "No fire," she whispered in her language, her tone firm. Rylan nodded, understanding without words. No light, no movement, no sound. The ship landed with a heavy thud. Its doors hissed open, and armored figures stepped out. They were tall, metallic suits humming with energy, helmets hiding their faces. They carried scanners and weapons that glowed faint green. Rylan's heart sank. He knew those movements, those formations, and mercenaries, scavengers, soldiers without a cause. People who hunted wrecks, killed survivors, and took whatever they found. Karel made a hand signal. The huntresses spread out quietly, moving like shadows across the roots and branches. Rylan stayed low, watching the men scan the area. One of them knelt near the fire pit from the night before. He touched the ash, then looked up at the others. They began to fan out, searching, tracking, hunting. Rylan clenched his fists. He whispered, "They followed my beacon." Karel turned to him. Eyes sharp, he pointed at his wrist console, now flickering weakly with blue light. It had been sending a distress signal since the crash. He had hoped it would bring rescue. Instead, it had brought hunters. He tore it off quickly, smashing it against the rock until the light died. The sound was small but sharp, One of the mercenaries turned his head. Hearing it, Karel reacted instantly. Pressing Rylan down into the mud, the beam of light passed right over them, but didn't stop. He held his breath, every muscle frozen. The moment passed like a blade through silence. Minutes crawled by. The mercenaries moved deeper into the forest. Karel signaled again, a simple wave of her hand. The Huntresses began to move quietly behind the intruders. They were hunters by nature. Now they would hunt the hunters. Rylan followed, his heart pounding in rhythm with the distant hum of the ship. The forest seemed to come alive again. Branches moved. Shadows shifted one by one. The Huntresses struck. A silent arrow, a flash of blue light, a whisper of movement. The mercenaries fell without a sound. Dragged into the darkness, Rylan covered his mouth, both amazed and horrified at their precision. He saw Karel leap from a tree, landing behind the last soldier. Her blade cut through his weapon's strap, sending it to the ground before he could shout. She struck the back of his helmet, knocking him cold. The fight ended as quickly as it began. The forest was silent again. Only the hum of the empty ship remained. Karel walked back to Rylan, her breathing calm. She looked at him with a strange softness. Not just respect, but trust. He stood slowly, his eyes wide with disbelief. You saved me again, he whispered. She tilted her head, her silver eyes glowing faintly. Then she touched her chest and said one word. Together. The meaning hit deeper than any translation. Rylan nodded, smiling faintly. Yeah, he said. Together. They walked toward the clearing where the fire had once burned. The ashes were cold now, scattered by the wind. Rylan crouched down and picked up a stick. He struck it against a rock, creating a spark. Karel watched him curiously. He smiled. One last fire. The flame grew slowly. Small but steady. The Huntresses gathered around, their faces glowing softly in the light. Rylan looked at the fire, then at Karel. This fire means something different now, he said quietly. It's not danger anymore, Karel nodded, understanding his tone even if not his words. It's life, Rylan added. They sat together as dawn began to rise. The sky turned from black to silver and the forest shimmered with new light. Karel pulled out a small crystal, the same kind she had given him before. She held it over the flame and it began to glow brighter. Then she placed it in his hand. A symbol of bond, of unity, of survival. Rylan looked at it, the crystal pulsing softly in his palm. He smiled. Maybe this place isn't trying to kill me after all, he whispered. Karel tilted her head, smiling faintly. She pointed to the horizon where a faint shimmer rose. The first rescue signal. Rylan's eyes widened. My signal, he said. Karel nodded once, her expression calm, but her eyes full of quiet pride. The fire crackled between them, a human and a huntress, two lives from two worlds. Bound by fire, blood, and survival. Rylan looked at the sky, the signal growing brighter. He whispered to the recorder on his wrist. Captain Rylan Cole, stranded survivor. He paused, looking at Karel and the others. Not alone anymore. The flame burned strong, the smoke rose high, carrying a story into the sky. A story of trust born from fear, of war turned into friendship. And as the ship in orbit began to descend again, the Huntresses stood ready beside him, together, watching the light of the new fire. A fire that no longer called enemies but called allies and maybe a future. The fire burned low. Thin trails of smoke climbed slowly into the soft dawn sky. Captain Rylan Cole sat in the clearing, his eyes fixed on the flickering light. The Huntresses moved quietly around him. Silent as always, they were cleaning their weapons, mending torn armor and marking the fallen trees with strange glowing symbols. Each symbol shimmered briefly, then faded into the bark like whispers to the forest. Rylan looked up at the horizon. The faint rescue signal blinked far above, steady and rhythmic. He couldn't stop staring at it. A human light in a non-human sky. After so many days trapped on this world, that tiny pulse of light felt like a heartbeat calling him home. He felt hope again, but also a strange sadness, because he wasn't the same man who had crashed here. Karel walked over to him, her silver eyes calm and thoughtful. She carried her spear in one hand and a small piece of the beast's crystal hide in the other. She knelt beside the fire and placed the crystal into the flames. The fire changed color instantly, turning from orange to deep blue. It hummed softly like it was alive. Rylan watched in awe. What are you doing? He whispered. Karel looked at him and said a single word. Signal. Then she pointed to the sky. Rylan understood. The fire wasn't just for warmth anymore. It was a beacon, one that reached both heaven and earth. The smoke shimmered faintly as it rose. He could see tiny sparkles of blue light carried upward. Maybe this world's strange energy was amplifying the signal. Maybe that's why his rescue ship had finally seen it either way. The fire, the same fire that once brought danger, was now bringing hope. The younger huntress, the one who had helped heal him, approached with quiet steps. She offered him a small fruit again, glowing green like before. He smiled and accepted it, biting slowly. The taste reminded him of survival, of life beyond fear. He looked around at them. Karel and her huntresses. They were no longer shadows to him. They were allies, warriors, maybe even friends. Karel sat across from him. For a while, neither spoke. The silence between them wasn't cold anymore, it was calm. Rylan looked into the fire and said softly, "When that ship lands, I might have to go." Karel tilted her head. Watching him with those steady, knowing eyes, she didn't answer. But her gaze said she understood. She pointed at the stars, then at her heart. Then she touched his shoulder lightly and said one word. "Remember." Rylan nodded, his throat tight. "I will," he said quietly. He didn't need to explain. He knew she understood, no matter how far he went. He'd carry this place, these people, in his memory. Suddenly, the air trembled. A deep hum rolled across the clearing. Rylan looked up. The rescue ship was descending fast. Its engines roared as dust and leaves swirled in the wind. The huntresses stood together, their armor glowing faintly in the golden light. Karel watched the ship with steady eyes, no fear, no anger, only quiet acceptance. The ship landed near the wreck of his old one. The ramp opened, and human voices echoed through the air. Rylan felt his heart twist, the sound of his own kind. He stood looking at Karel one last time. He wanted to say something, anything, but words felt too small. She simply placed her hand on his chest over his heart. Then she stepped back and gave him a warrior's nod. The same nod he had seen after their first battle. Rylan turned and walked toward the ship. The rescue team rushed forward shouting, "Captain Cole! You're alive!" He smiled faintly, nodding, but his eyes drifted back to the forest. Through the dust and smoke, he could still see Karel and her huntresses standing together. The blue firelight flickered around them like stars caught on earth. "Let's get you home, sir," one of the rescuers said. Rylan looked at him and replied quietly, "I already found one." The man gave him a puzzled look, but Rylan didn't explain. He stepped onto the ramp, feeling the ship vibrate beneath his feet. As the engines roared to life, he looked out the window one last time. The forest seemed to wave back. The trees shimmered, the fire glowed brighter, and the huntresses raised their weapons in salute. Rylan pressed his hand to the glass, and in that moment, he realized this planet had tested him, changed him, accepted him. He had come as a stranger, and now he was leaving as part of its story. The ship rose slowly into the sky. The clouds opened, revealing a vast ocean of stars. Far below, the blue fire still burned, marking the place where human courage met alien strength. Rylan leaned back in his seat, closing his eyes. He whispered softly, "Sometimes lighting a fire doesn't bring enemies." He smiled, his voice barely a breath. "Sometimes it brings the people you were meant to find." The stars shimmered above. The signal pulsed one last time, fading into the distance. And somewhere beneath that endless sky, the huntresses watched the light vanish into the heavens. Their leader, Karel, placed her hand over her heart and whispered the human word she had learned. Together, the fire burned one last time, strong and bright. A flame that carried not fear but unity. A fire that turned strangers into allies, and a story that would travel across the stars. The tale of the stranded pilot who lit a fire and found a world waiting in the dark.